combination resumes are just that, a combination of a functional resume and a chronological resume. So what are the benefits of using a combination format? Christy? Or Craig?
Go ahead, Craig, if you want to go.
I was just going to say that since none of us really seem comfortable with truly functional resumes, adding the chronological section gives us that comfort that we need. We want to see what all the person's can do and what their skills are, but when we can finally see where were they when, then all of a sudden we're back in our comfort zone.
Okay.
And then, a benefit to a combination resume can be that you can really draw attention to those transferable skills. This could be appropriate even if you're continuing in your profession, but you just really want to highlight, some things that the employer is looking for. It's a way to organize the data on your resume, but it is, a great way to help, for example, a career changer identify and showcase for the employer that they do have the skills they're looking for, despite the fact that maybe they didn't have the job title that corresponds to it in the past. They've had the experience. So that's when I think it's beneficial to use a combination resume. Again, for some of the people that traditionally people think of using a functional resume, I would always try a combination resume first.
So let's take a look at some of these examples. And we have John Doe here. This, to me, looks like they might be, whose John Doe resume is this?
This is mine. This is Christy.
Okay.
So this is someone that has a lot of experience in, the corporate world, and they've been in positions as like a manager of training kind of positions, and then earlier in their career as a branch manager and a mortgage loan originator. But they recently got their degree, with a master's in organizational development, and that's what they want to really transition into fully. So that's why the objective is on this resume, because it wouldn't be apparent from their prior job titles that they were going for an OD consultant position. And then, their kind of summary of qualifications that, again, show what they have to offer. They have 10 years of experience using organizational development skills. They are a change agent. They are a high performer. And then they do have that master's degree that most of these positions are looking for. So that's what the summary of qualifications highlights for the reader. Then within their more traditional experience that's presented chronologically, in this last position, we lumped all the positions together. So he was promoted 3 times. So we put those at the top. But then underneath, we kind of showed the key accomplishment and the curriculum design, process improvement, management, consulting. These are the skills that we hold out of the job posting that these types of positions we're looking for. And we did that again for the prior work experience as a branch manager and a mortgage loan operator. A branch manager is doing a lot around, in this case, because it was a turnaround case, around culture change and employee engagement, employee development. So we really wanted to highlight and make it easier for the reader to see this guy has the skills we're looking for.
All right. We have a question from the audience about having had only 2 jobs in the last 40 years without any gaps of employment. Is that where you addressed the key accomplishments from the one employer where he had continued promotions within the actual organization, is that something that person could use?
So you said 2 jobs in the last 40 years?
Correct. 40.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Key accomplishments would be, a key way to convey, even though they only had 2 job titles, what they offered and did for the employer. Craig?
Craig, you want to add something?
Well, I was going to ask, was it just 2 job titles, or was it 2 employers, and did they progress through? I would ask what was the most recent employer, and let's say instead of 40 years that was 15 or 20 years, I would just list that one especially if the two different jobs over the 40 years, the two different employers were doing relatively the same work. Then there's no
Yeah.
reason to list the older experience.
Okay. Let's move on to the last example that we have here, talking about a combination resume. And I think, Craig, did this come from your examples?
The red job hunter is not mine, no.
Okay. It has a list of summary of skills and experience, and it has an employment history. And then at the bottom it has education. This looks like this might have been a functional resume example. I apologize for that.
No, it
So,
looks perfect to me because by the time it's laid out very well with all of the summaries, and then the quick employment history, and then the education. It backs it all up. It ties it all together. It's a well done resume.
so this might be a good format to use for the gentleman with the 40 years of experience.
Sure.
Okay. We also have another question from the audience about the gap in paid employment due to an extended job search. Is there a good answer about how to handle that on a resume?
What I see people doing is, if somebody was out of work during 2009, I know why. The economy was awful. You don't have to explain it to me, but if you say job hunting and worked various part-time jobs and temporary work, which meant you were trying to do anything you could while you were looking for a job, that shows me you have ambition. If you can't list anything, then I have my doubts.
Okay. All right.
If you did anything to upgrade your skills during that time, you could use
Well,
that,
yeah.
continuing education. If you did any volunteer work, you could list that. You just have to be careful of how you're, um, you know, wording the section title if you're including volunteer work or something like that. You don't want to say, work history, maybe just experience. That can be volunteer or regular. So, you always want to be truthful.
Okay, is there still an aversion to a two-page webinar resume, or I know depending on your level of experience, if you're an educator, if you have a lot of IT experience, 2 pages are acceptable. What should the average person with standard job experience strive to have for their resume?
I think the average person should strive to have a one-page resume, but if they have too much information, too much good information to present, it's okay to go past one page. But one mistake I see people make is they want to get it on that one page or as few pages as possible, so they keep shrinking the font size. And I was just looking at one yesterday that was a 7-point font size. And I gave up trying to read it. I'm sorry, it's just too much work. I can't see that.
Right.
You don't want to use a magnifying glass?
Right.
And I think Dee, this goes back to the point of the resume is to get in the door.
Good. It's a marketing document, right?
Yeah, and that's been articulated, but I think that needs to be brought home again and again. It's to get in the door, to get that face-to-face meeting.
Well said.
One last question before we close up our webinar today. We have a question from the audience that says, when an employer is phone screening you, they usually ask you for a salary range and if the travel distance will create any difficulties for you. I think honesty is the best policy regarding these points instead of saying that you are willing to travel anywhere. What are your thoughts?
Well, regarding the distance, hopefully you've already determined before you've applied for the job that it's within your commuting distance, so that should be easy to confirm to them on the phone that you know where it's located and you're willing to do that. Regarding the salary history, I mean, my I coach my candidates to try to avoid answering that question too early in the selection process because it's only used to screen you out, not screen you in generally, and that you do that by, trying to defer the conversation as long as, possible. Sometimes it can be difficult to do, but, and try to, you want to get the interview. I mean, ideally, you've done your research. You know the type of position. You know what the salary range is in general. So you're figuring, they're going to be paying within your range. So I would try to say, until I have a chance to talk with you and really learn about the job responsibilities, I think it's premature to discuss salary, or try to turn it around to them and find out what the salary range they've budgeted for the position is so that you can properly position yourself within that range rather than ruling yourself out prematurely.
As far
There's
as
also a
distance,
whole lot of,
I'm sorry,
I'm
as far
sorry, I
as
was going to
distance,
talk about the, go ahead, Craig.
if you're trying to move on, that's fine.
No, I wanted to address the salary range. There is some information on Illinois WorkNet about ranges for positions that all of the job seekers can look at to find out what a range, an acceptable range would be. So if they're armed with that information, that helps them answer that question more easily. Craig, talk about the distance.
Well, you can put it in the best wording possible. For instance, and I've driven that distance many times, so I'm quite comfortable with it. Matter of fact, it gives me a little time to decompress when I'm on the way home.
Very good. Last thing, networking. When somebody does or doesn't get out, networking can be accomplished through LinkedIn for one thing. But when you're out physically networking, what's a tip that somebody can use to, when they're networking with somebody, how can they use a particular marketing piece, Leanne, to reach out to people with whom they're networking?
Well, one thing I would suggest is have a specific business card, especially if you're currently employed and things aren't going well. Have a separate business card with your contact information, phone number, email address. Make it look professional so that, because you never know who knows whom, and you may be handing that card to somebody who's, the best buddy in the HR company that you're currently working for, and they say, oh, by the way, did you know Joan's job hunting? You may not want to have that information out, so having a card just with your name, phone number, again, vistaprint.com, whatever. You can have one really look nice. Make sure it's not on your home printer because sometimes those look a little tacky. I think that's critical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they're not
I ran across one more question. What format should a teenager use of the resumes?
Well, I have two teenagers, and, the schools are working with them now to create resumes in high school, and they are looking for a pretty traditional format, but, the thing is, they might be including their extracurricular activities, their part-time work, any volunteering that they do, and I would, have those as separate sections of the resume, and, it kind of depends on what they're applying for, using the resume for, which order those sections would go in. My daughter has applied now, like she volunteered, and she's applying for more serious positions at the Brookfield Zoo where she volunteered at. So her community service is going above her work experience, which is in the food industry. But when she was at school and applying to, for the library, she put her work experience first and her community service second. So again, customization even for high school students, teenagers.
And just one other thing that Christy said earlier, this is really where it's critical to make sure it is grammatically correct. no punctuation, no spelling errors, and a font size that can be read, having
Very
an
good.
adult look it over, because I have seen some really poor resumes from teenagers, and they may be the best young people in the whole wide world, but no one's going to give them a chance.
Yes, that's very true. Well, I would like to thank our presenters today, Leanne Hoagland-Smith of Advanced Systems, the next generation of talent management, Christy Seawall of Career Catalyst, Craig Frank of Frank's Employment, and all of you who attended the resume, along with Natasha and Chelsea, who helped me on the back end of the presentation. Our next webinar is scheduled for April 9th and 10th and will be on career transition. If you are not already a member of our Illinois WorkNet Virtual Job Hub network on LinkedIn, we invite you to join us, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thank you very much for attending.